programme here. We had a very good day with responsible tourism yesterday, and I'm delighted this morning that we've got 3 excellent speakers from around the world to talk with us about responsible technology for travel and tourism. There's an audience here and there's an audience globally around the world watching in. Andrea, where are you? Are you in Scotland?
I'm in Edinburgh today, yeah.
So you're not yet at COP26?
No, tomorrow, and the rest of the week.
Chris, you're in Australia, I think.
That's right, yes, New South Wales.
And Keith, I think you're in Dubai.
Correct, I am indeed, Harold.
Excellent. Well, we're going to just quickly go around and ask each of you for your views about how responsible technology can help responsible travel and tourism. There's a lot of interest in this yesterday, and we will be live streaming this after the show is over. So, just to begin perhaps with you, Keith, you're based in Dubai. You run a company called Globally. One of the things exciting about your company for me is that you have a web platform on which lots of different kinds of sustainable technology are presented for people to see. And behind that you have a consultancy and mentoring system which enables people to learn how to more rapidly introduce the key technology into their businesses. Do you want to just say a bit more about how you work and what's been happening? So I think people are also always surprised to hear it's coming out of Dubai.
Well, thank you very much, Harold. I mean, you've described it very well. We do indeed have a web platform which has over 1,000 videos about sustainable technologies, not just for the travel industry, but actually for any company that's looking for sustainable solutions. I think it's a very exciting time to be in this space because there is so much innovation happening. And you're right, we do go out and we talk to companies to introduce them to opportunities for more sustainable solutions. And often their initial response is, yes, but we've already done that. But when we drill down, we find, well, actually, because of the pace of change that's going on in so many areas, especially with AI being applied to various aspects, whether it's a hotel or a manufacturing business or whatever, there are huge opportunities now with AI, with the Internet of Things, with new technologies becoming available in a whole host of different domains to improve even on what was best in class 5 years ago.
Keith, let me just see whether you see the world the same as I do. I think one of the problems with some of this sustainable technology, most obviously I think with solar panels, is that a lot of claims were made for solar generation in the early years. A lot of people experimented and were disappointed by the results. And to some extent, the reputation of solar was tarnished for those early adopters. And one of the challenges, I think, is to help people to understand that solar's changed quite a lot in the last 15 years.
I think that's a very good, very sensible statement. I mean, there has been, I think with many situations where you're adopting something early on, it's unproven, it doesn't always work as well as it was supposed to. It takes time for that to be improved. And that was certainly what happened with solar. Too much was promised in the early days, and it's taken a few years, but it has only been a few years actually, for solar really to become a fantastic technology which can generate electricity more cheaply than any other form. And on a small scale. I mean, that's the other beauty of solar, which we sometimes forget. It's a very small scale technology. I mean, you can implement solar on a single building and it can really start having an impact. You don't have to leave it to the grid operator to do all the work. There's big opportunities for individual businesses to step into that space.
You do now see as well.
Solar is, I mean, perhaps what's happened in solar is one of the most dramatic areas where we've seen a staggering improvement in the opportunity and the return on investment. But I mean, it's happened in many other areas as well. I mean, wind is another one. Thermodynamic water heaters is another technology which is quite old, but it's really come into its own in the last few years and is a fantastic solution for hotels in many cases.
Why did you choose to base your business in Dubai?
That's a good question, actually. I guess. I found myself in Dubai. My business partner was also in Dubai. Dubai is a very dynamic environment where there's a lot of people are very open to trying new things, I would say. The government encourages innovation. The government actually sees a lot of opportunity, or sees the need for quite a rapid transformation in terms of sustainability. They're very forward-thinking. They have a very clear vision of where they want the country to be over the next few decades, and they're determined to get there. And they're really very open to anyone who brings new ideas, new innovations, new ways of doing things.
It's very striking how sustainable the Expo is this year. There's extraordinary kind of developments in technology associated with that. But to be honest, Keith, one of the things that frustrates me about Dubai is I know an awful lot more is going on that doesn't get talked about.
Yes, I think that's true to an extent. I mean, Dubai sometimes does a very good, they're very, very good at talking about things. And when you peel under the surface, things are not, as you were saying about solar, in fact, it's been a little bit oversold. But in other areas, yes, I mean, especially now there's really a huge change going on, not just in Dubai, actually, but also in other countries in the region. Saudi has really got behind the need to open its economy, change the way its society functions, and adopt sustainable practices at pace. We've also seen significant, the World Cup has got Qatar focused on sustainability as well. So there's a real drive across the whole region now to adopt new technologies to meet the challenge of sustainability. Lots going on here.
But I understand that one of the things that's been happening in Dubai is the city government monitoring the performance of the hotels in terms of their basic resource use.
Yes, that's absolutely the case. That was something they were aiming to do a couple of years ago, and then COVID hit. But in the middle of this year, they went ahead and implemented it. So all the hotels are now required to report on their use of, or their greenhouse gas emissions and their use of their implementation of sustainable best practices. So the government is, and I'm sure we will see more now. I mean, as the government gathers those metrics, there's going to be growing interest from the government in which hotels are really taking things forward at pace, and which ones are lagging behind.
I hope that we'll perhaps hear about it at the Arabian travel market this year. It'll interest you to know, Keith, that we had Valencia on one of the panels yesterday, and they were talking about the way they're now looking at the amount of water and carbon that the tourism sector in the city of Valencia is using, and I think more and more destinations will move over to that kind of monitoring. But as far as I can see, it's really Dubai and Valencia are leading on that at the moment.
Wow. Fantastic. Yeah.
Andrea, if we could come to you up there in Edinburgh with green tourism and green business. You've been around it for a long time. One of the things that was true about your business from the beginning is that you weren't siloed in tourism. You've always been looking at what's happening in other sectors. And I think one of the problems about tourism is that we self-assess our progress. We self-reference way too much. And actually there are other sectors passing us now. But do you want to comment maybe on the problems which arise when businesses have had a poor experience of new technology and how you overcome that? Because I think it's a big problem.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me on the panel, Harold, and good morning, everybody. Yes, I think that is a challenge. I think that the hospitality and tourism industry is not one that necessarily embraces new innovation in terms of hard technology like the solar panels and the energy management systems. I think where we've seen a significant uptake of technology and innovation in technology with the 2,500 businesses we work with over 22 countries, and especially as a result of COVID, is adoption of what I call like the soft technology, the kind of interaction with their guests and visitors in a much more positive way. So we've got a great example of a hotel app called Crichton, which is an engagement piece. It makes the experience for the visitors paperless. You can book in online, you can order your food online, it reduces staff time because you don't have to have so many people in reception, and that is a major challenge for us in the industry at the moment. The staff shortages is something we cannot ignore, and the whole kind of making sure that there's fair wages for staff and proper training. So we've seen a massive change in people using technology to make the passage, the visitor process more seamless. And we've got some great stats from the Association of Visitor Attractions in Scotland, where visitor attractions are only 50% are fully open and only 40% partially, and they're generally the industry is about 30% non-viable in terms of survival at the moment. But use of the booking apps that have come about and being able to book appointments has seen a massive change in the visitor management within the industry, within the cities, and helping that make it better for residents because they can manage when people are coming to the visitor attraction. But also the research shows that something like 30% of the visitors are having a significantly better experience because of that booking ability, that they've got a slot when they come to the visitor attraction. They don't have to queue for ages to see the picture or to see the artifact. They're much more comfortable because there's much more space. Their experience in the shop and the cafe is better. So there's a lot of businesses in Scotland, the visitor attractions are going to continue with that innovative technology to booking and managing their visitors, and actually looking at a volume versus value model, and even looking at putting up their prices. So being able to adopt sustainable and responsible tourism attitudes, giving their business a better experience, and really embracing the technology. And I think as a result of that, we're going to see the industry being more technologically driven, more comfortable in using technology, and I think visitors as well will also do that. You know, back in the day when you said we're going to have a robot to check you in, everyone said, "Oh no, it's a people thing." Actually, the quality of the experience you get is the seamless logging, checking in, but then being able to experience in the service in the restaurant or with the concierge or whatever makes the whole experience that much better.
Andrea, one of the things about your business from the beginning is you've avoided engaging with the Global Sustainable Tourism Council and certification. Do you want to explain why you've done that?
I didn't say that we avoided engaging. We started green tourism in 1997, 25 years, and we've been engaging with a lot of organisations, including ICRT and international bodies, the Visit Project, and we've learned a lot, and we've built our system up, and we've got endorsement and recognition from the organisations that are relevant to us within the UK and Ireland. So it's not an avoidance, it's more the fact that at the moment I don't believe that the GSTC is going to benefit us as an organisation, and I think that's something I have to bear in mind for my own business and for my own members and customers in terms of return on investment and value for money, and what's actually going to contribute. We don't not talk to people. We are in touch with many other certification programs, organisations working in responsible tourism. We work very closely with most of the tourism agencies within the UK, where I would say that's our main market.
Do you think we're going to see an improvement in the amount of transparency in the claims that hotels make for their sustainability practices? Because it seems to me that's the big problem with certification. It's an opaque process. And a disgruntled consumer who's perhaps checked into a hotel which claims to be green but actually gives you 2 key cards at reception for a single person so that you can put one to override the switch by the wall. I mean, that's still going on, and yet they're certified as good quality green hotels.
I think there's a massive change in the need to be transparent, and that is being driven by customers' awareness, society. COVID has moved sustainable tourism on at least 10 years, in the fact that people now understand there's a link between the health of the globe and the health of people, looking after people, and we are getting more and more requests from clients that want to be able to display their certificates, their scores in a transparent way. We're looking at a sustainability tracker data, which we're working with the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute, which will be launching next year, which will have metrics that hotels and B&Bs and other businesses types can report on what they're doing. And they want to do that because they want to show that they're transparent, but actually it's becoming a mandatory, especially in some sectors. So the meetings and events industry in particular, the conference organisers want to be able to report on the waste, the energy used, the water used, and that's part of the reason why we launched our Green Meeting Standard earlier this year, and we're working in partnership with trade associations to get that engagement and process. And yes, the need for transparency is crucial going forward, and if businesses aren't able to report, then they will lose business as a result.
I think we've seen in the last month we've seen one, there's another one just coming. We've seen Google now enabling you very easily to find out what the carbon impact of your flight is, which is a big step forward. You don't necessarily have to buy it from Google in order to find out about the carbon emissions from the particular flight you're thinking of taking. And the other thing is that Booking.com appear to be going to come out with much more public listings by the businesses on their site with the claims that they're making for what they're doing, that's sustainability. And of course at that point, that becomes part of the contract with the individual consumer, who, when they go to the hotel and find that they're given an extra key card to override the electricity switch off, will be able to go down to the front desk and say, where's the compensation for this then? Because you missold me this experience. That's going to be a big game changer, isn't it? As that transparency comes through.
It is, and Booking.com already have that ability to list businesses and the businesses self-report, but Booking.com, like Google, have now got a list of credible eco-labels and certifications that they recognise. So Booking.com, we give them a data stream. Google, we've got meetings with them next week to get us onto the list, and that's something that the online tourism agencies, travel agents are reliant on the certification bodies to make sure they maintain credibility and they're reporting on what the businesses that they've certified are doing.
Andrea, I think what you'll see with Booking.com is that the individual business, when they list themselves on the site, will be making claims about what they're doing, and they'll make them themselves. And those are the claims which will be actionable by a disgruntled consumer, probably Harold Goodwin, putting in a claim for compensation for having been missold. Yeah. Chris, I've left you until last, not because you're least at all, but it seems to me your approach is significantly different, isn't it? Because a lot of the work you've done through Green Butler has been focused on trying to help consumers and the people employed in the travel and tourism industry to change their behaviour to use the technology better. Do you want to just explain the philosophy that lies behind Green Butler?
Sure. So good evening, everybody, from Australia. Essentially, the philosophy is not new. It's an old one. It's about thriftiness. It's about conserving. And while the eco-technologies that exist often are very good, and renewable energy and renewable water systems are very good, they don't change behaviours. In fact, they can backfire and increase behaviour, can increase consumption. So my area of focus is on conserving resources. It's about adjusting the social practices so that people, in preparation of food, in preparation of the room for the guest, or the guest staying there and using the systems, do not waste those resources. It's not an expensive process then, is it, really? It's just asking people to save and giving them guidance. So we can achieve savings of over 30% in resource use just by guiding people better with a very small capital outlay. And it's been tending for humans to not look at that in the modern age, because in recent decades we've been looking at consumption and the society is getting more complex, and humans are interested in breaking down and solving problems by maybe adding complexity sometimes, or adding steps, when in fact we can stand back and realize that some of the things that we're doing could be done better in a way that's wasting less or avoiding usage or choosing to have a lower performance. And we found a remarkable change in the way that staff respond to that and to guests. I suppose it's the equivalent of a low carbon diet. It's the equivalent of the concepts of health and fitness that were, and diets that came out in the 70s and the 80s, but looking at it from the point of view of resource and carbon.
Chris, if my memory is correct, you piloted a lot of this at a resort you own, Crystal Creek Meadows. Do you want to just say something about your experience of actually introducing it and the guest response to what you were doing?
Sure. So I developed a prototype of My Green Butler, which is a sustainability management platform that provides eco-feedback to guests, advice to guests, information to staff, advice to staff, and compliance reporting. And what I wanted to do, I made quite strenuous efforts to try to minimize the footprint of my own business, but I got to a green ceiling where I couldn't really save anymore because I couldn't afford the technology, or the technology didn't exist. And so I realized I couldn't get to net zero. That was impossible. And my journey started in 2006 on that. So I then realized that actually it was the guests that needed the help. I was identifying that they were wasting, and maybe, in fact, it wasn't their fault that they were wasting. So I introduced the system to communicate to the guests, and I undertook a PhD around undertaking that prototype because I wanted to apply a scientific base to the process. I measured the consumption of the guests manually every day by reading their meters, but I also used smart technology so I could double check that the consumption was accurate. I recorded their consumption by the minute, and we've made big savings. However, as the proprietor, obviously I was charging around about $400 a night, so that would be similar to the prices one would pay in sterling, £300, £400. And so it's quite a big thing to, when guests arrive, to then introduce the concept of conserving after they've paid that amount of money. So I have to confess, on the very first day, when the car arrived and I was going to introduce My Green Butler for the first time, I thought, gosh, I'm really going to have to do this now. I've been believing this was going to be right. Will it work? And I'm here tonight, and after all the years, because I had such a tremendously positive response from the majority of guests, and an amazing experience of seeing how the staff changed in terms of their attitudes to resources. And so I shouldn't have been so anxious about it, because in fact people were just waiting to receive that sort of guidance, which they had not seen before. Because in our modern world, life is very, very complex, and we don't know what our footprint is. Everything is completely invisible to us in terms of those elements that create that footprint. And so what My Green Butler does is help make the invisible visible, but doing so in a manner to guide people. It's a butler service. So my experience was trepidation, and then one of great joy, and one then of sustained effort to introduce My Green Butler on a global basis.
So just to push you a bit further on that, Chris, has it now been taken up by other people who've seen the value of it and introduced it into their own accommodation or resort or attraction?
Yes. So before COVID, we undertook pilot sites in the United Kingdom and France and around Australia. COVID came along, and obviously there were some delays in progress there, but we've restarted. And all the sites have restarted that were in the pilots and now moved to a commercial position. And now we are getting contacts from within Australia and quite a lot of interest now in the UK. So I'm making presentations at this strange time of day in Australia to people in working hours in the UK to demonstrate the service. So now it's really gaining momentum. I think people see tremendous value in certifications and the frameworks. And they see tremendous value in renewable resources, but there's still a huge gap in how you can actually reach a net zero situation, given the scale of waste that exists and given the complexity of that exists within buildings where you're providing a service for so many people.
One of the things I think we often forget about travel and tourism is that often people's first experience of a new technology will be when they're on holiday. I remember my first experience of LED lights was in a hotel bedroom. Many people will first drive a dual car. Many people in Tenerife now will have the opportunity to drive a car powered by hydrogen in the next month or so. A lot of these new technologies are experienced for the first time in that process of of travelling where people are away from home and staying in another environment. And I don't think the industry should forget that. Chris, do you think by this time next year you'll be in a position to talk about some of the businesses around the world which have taken up My Green Butler? I ask you because next year will be the 20th anniversary of the Cape Town Declaration, and it'll be a big focus here at WTM on responsible tourism and on the technology for responsible tourism and responsible hospitality. So do you think you'll be ready to deliver some of these other places on the platform at WTM in November 2022?
I can't speak completely for them, but I believe so. So we're speaking to international hotel chains, major international amusement parks, small businesses, medium-sized, high-end businesses. They're all very keen. I'm sure they'll be absolutely delighted to be showcased next year. So yes, we'll be able to show a selection. I think that's important, is the fact that it's not just budget or economic price properties, it's high-end as well, everybody. The truth is, I believe, that we've been looking at in the wrong direction for this green guest. It's a fallacy. Because what is a green guest? What is green behaviour? It's very difficult to identify. But when you actually talk to people about reciprocating, asking them to do their bit, because you as a business have also made your efforts to reduce your footprint, you'll find that people will lend a hand. And that lending of hand makes enormous savings, and it really does help the staff. It gives them a sense of worth of what they're doing, and helps them maintain their loyalty, and it really builds traction for the business. So I'd be delighted to share those results with you next year.
Keith, thanks, Chris. Keith, I saw you nodding there. Is what Chris is saying striking resonance with you? Is that the way you think it's moving as well?
Yes, no, I think there's been, I really do think, I think Andrea mentioned earlier that COVID has really brought quite a sea change in terms of the pace of change, not just in travel, but in many other industries. And so, yeah, I'm very optimistic that many more people now want to do the right thing. They just need a little bit of help in terms of being given a tool that can help them do that, being given an option to do that. And that's really where businesses need to step up further and make sure that the options are available, that consumers have the choice, that they have the education. I mean, just one thing, but COVID has brought a lot of changes. I mean, dramatic changes to the travel industry, and one thing which perhaps has changed, certainly at the moment, people are traveling again, which is great, but they're also traveling for longer because they don't want to be at the airport flying every weekend or taking short trips. It's an effort, it's more of an effort to get somewhere now, so they want to go and stay for longer. So give them some encouragement. The hotels continue to price based on a room rate. What about offering guests a lower rate if they stay for longer and trying to embed that behaviour? Because at the end of the day, I mean, the biggest, in travel and tourism, the biggest carbon impact is getting to and from wherever you're going. And, the more we can encourage what COVID has started in terms of longer stays and fewer trips, the better.
Andrea, thanks very much, Keith. Andrea, what's your experience in Scotland? I mean, you've had an awful lot of domestic tourism this year. So people haven't been flying, they've been arriving by cars, and you've had lots of camper vans. But do you see people spending longer in Scotland, or is it still a weekend and 1 week destination?
Unfortunately, it's a bit of a fallacy to say that we've benefited from a staycation, because although that is definitely the case in the rural areas, in the cities it's not been the case at all. Yes. So occupancy rates have been down around about 30%, what they should be in the cities, and like I said, the rural areas are doing better, but they've also had the COVID rules around 2 metre, 1 metre, and massive issues around staff shortages, as I mentioned earlier, and even especially in rural areas, because we haven't got the foreign students coming over, we haven't got the people from Europe coming over, the government's putting lots of barriers in the way around amount of salary that you have to offer overseas employees. So it is an issue. So Scotland has done well in some areas, but significantly down in others. And I know that we've been very reliant on the domestic market, and I think in some areas we're seeing, as I mentioned, with the visitor attractions, about a kind of a value versus volume, so looking at higher prices and less people. We've now got examples of hotels in Edinburgh that are doing exactly that same thing. The visitor experience is better, they've less staff to look after them, lower occupancy rates, and that's their model now going forward.
I think there will be a trend towards multi-skilled staffing. We've seen that with the awards this year. A lot of effort during COVID went into increasing the range of skills that the existing staff had in order to improve the quality of the service and to focus on value than volume. We're into about the last 14 minutes, and I wanted to go around with two quick questions and go around all three of you twice. The first is around President Biden's obvious point, which needs never to be forgotten, which is that this is the critical decade. And Keith, it's all very well saying, it's taken a long time for people to get used to using this technology, but the real challenge now is to roll this out rapidly at scale, isn't it? We've got to make really rapid progress over the next 10 years if we're going to confront the climate change problem. Are you optimistic about that?
It depends which day of the week you ask me, Harold, honestly. Look, there is such a seabed of commitment from business, government. I really feel the pace of change is accelerating. People are much more aware. There is a lot more, better policies are being put in place. Businesses are stepping up either because of the greater regulation or because they just know it's the right thing to do. Consumers are more aware. We're definitely moving in the right direction, and we're moving much faster than we were even 2 or 3 years ago. But we really, we need exponential acceleration throughout the next 9 years.
One of the things that strikes me, Keith, and I'll come to you, Andrea and Chris in a minute to comment on the same thing, but we've seen 20 years now of responsible tourism awards. We've seen some fantastic proven solutions, but very often those solutions are not picked up and used by others. And one of the things we need to encourage, I think, is for people to learn from other businesses which are first adopters, because actually adopting something like, take Chris's example, adopting something that somebody's piloted and developed is surely what we want to be encouraging.
I completely agree with you, and that's very much what we globally are about. We are all about communicating success, communicating new technologies so that it's easier for other people to adopt them, running programs where we offer companies some consultancy around the new technologies that are available for them to adopt today. We're very focused on technologies which are in the market, which, as you say, have already been proven by another business somewhere, that have a good return on investment and that can make a big difference to sustainability. It's really, I strongly urge any business, please put a little bit of resource aside to take a look at what is available in the market today. It's changed a lot from where it was 5 years ago. Consumer interest in this area has changed a lot from where it was 5 years ago. So the business case at both the cost side and the potential revenue side is much stronger than it was. So please, set some time aside and take a look at what's out there.
Keith, I hope that we can work together by using the platform for change that we're developing with WTM to speed up this process. We've really got to accelerate. Andrea, what's been your experience? Because you, to some extent, you're almost a membership network, really, aren't you? There's an awful lot of exchange goes on within the businesses that you relate to. Are they willing to share in that way? Are people sharing ideas at work? And also sharing failure seems to me to be important too, so that we don't keep repeating the same mistakes.
Yeah, it's one of our basic principles within the Green Tourism Programme is about sort of pollinating ideas. So information that you collect from one business is something you can then pass on to another business. And it's interesting, although they're often in competition with each other. When it comes to sustainability, businesses are very, very much more willing to share, and we've been focusing really hard on getting them to tell their green story in a way that's easy to understand by their teams, but also by their guests and their suppliers. So we have on our blog page and the website as many green stories as we can possibly share, and it is mainly around what's good, but also some of the challenges and some of the level of investment people have had to make. But it's interesting because what we're hearing more and more now is the net zero story, and actually a lot of people don't even know what net zero means. In fact, at COP they're going to decide what actually net zero carbon actually means. And interesting, even in the last 2 or 3 months on the lead up to COP, the discussion around what Scope 3 emissions has suddenly gone bonkers, and that's something that everyone has been ignoring for many years because it is so complicated and so difficult. But I think the fact that that's been discussed by industry, by associations, by the government, and reporting and being able to balance and manage your Scope 3 as well as Scopes 1 and 2 carbon, I think shows me that actually this has really got teeth now, and that actually we are going to see improvements.
Andrea, one of the differences between you and I is you're definitely a glass half full person, and I'm a glass half empty, because what worries me about the focus on Scope 3 is it's so much more fun to insist that your suppliers clean up their act rather than you clean up your own. And it makes me very nervous when I see this move to Scope 3. I don't disagree that it's important, but really the businesses need to be taking responsibility for their Scope 1 and Scope 2, and not just pushing it down the supply chain to make it somebody else's problem, which an awful lot of businesses have done. We need to watch that very carefully. Chris, what's your view about the willingness of people to share the experiences?
I think it's essential. I think many are. I'd like to answer your question, the first question though, about how optimistic I am, is that I think I'm optimistic in some quarters about the public's attitude, about corporates wanting more information. I'm pessimistic about governments' lack of understanding that in this modern world, our carbon and energy literacy is so low that we are not going to achieve the targets because it's far too complicated and we are not across how we're going to do it sufficiently. And this is a big, big problem. So, for example, providing grants for equipment is one thing, but if you're not going to teach people carbon and energy literacy satisfactorily, they're not going to make the best job of what they've got. And what I found very heartening is a group in Cumbria, so Cumbria Action for Sustainability, and they have a carbon literacy trainer as part of that program. That's the sort of thing we need. We don't need necessarily more technologies. What we need is people's better understanding of what is at stake and what are the impacts of their everyday lives or the way they're having their holidays or the way they're running their businesses. So I'm pessimistic about that because all the data that we're providing them is just lots of numbers, and it's just not really, it's just not sinking in because it's just not translatable in everyday life. So I'm concerned about that. Going back to your question though, I think the demonstrations are the most valuable way of helping our sector progress. And it's really important for businesses to open up and show what they're doing. We're doing that in the City of Sydney, so I'm a member of the Sustainable Destination Partnership there, and we have a whole process, a working group where we're sharing our experiences and so forth, and My Green Butler is part of that process. And I think it's extremely valuable to give engineers, general managers and so forth confidence in making further steps forward. And yes, people share what doesn't work and what does work. So I think that is, a crucible of what we should be doing. And I'd be very happy to try and share that next year with you in terms of our case studies.
Thanks, Chris. Keith, one of the things which has disappointed me in the last year is clearly nobody's fault, but the Expo in Dubai is, as far as I can see, I haven't yet managed to visit, but so far as I can see, it's an extraordinary achievement in sustainability terms, and unfortunately less people are going to see it than might otherwise have seen it. And I'm hoping that certainly the Sustainability Pavilion and some of the others will continue long past the Expo dates. Because it seems to me that some of the technology that's been showcased there, many more people need to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it is very unfortunate the way things have worked out for Expo, because I think the Dubai government has done an amazing job of curating a really first-rate Expo and putting sustainability at the core of it in many ways. And a number of the pavilions, the country pavilions, have followed that lead and have some really impressive sustainability-related technologies on display. So, yeah, I mean, if you have the chance, please come before it closes. I don't know what the government's plans might be for extending it. I suspect they're probably going to see what the visitor numbers are like and whether they're, whether it makes sense to continue after the Expo. My only comment actually is that I haven't seen Dubai as busy as it has been in October for probably about 10 years. So it's really having an impact. People are there. It's very popular. There are long queues, but it's a very impressive expo.
I'm certainly hoping to get out to see it sometime early in the new year, Keith, and if I do, I'll look you up. We're down to the last 4 minutes, and I've been told I mustn't crash over the pip. So you've got 1 minute each for a top tip about how to get more rapid progress and meet President Biden's challenge of this being the critical decade. One top tip from each of you to wrap up. Chris.
I think it's key to have an ambassador at your hospitality business that is given high quality training on carbon and energy literacy, and then for them to help lead their team to better embrace what is carbon and energy literacy and to root out waste, because that's the real cause. You can save over 30% by just changing practices.
And be brave and talk to the consumers, talk to the clients, not just the staff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everyone can involve the staff, the guests, everybody should be involved. The data shouldn't be the exclusive use of an engineer. It's got to be available for everybody in a palatable way.
Andrea, what would your advice be?
I think that in order to get started on a green journey, you need to be looking at what you're currently doing. We have a lot of businesses who think they're not doing very much, when in actual fact they are. And in fact, they've got immense resources within their teams that have a lot of knowledge and enthusiasm to make that commitment. So first of all, look at what you're already doing and then build around a framework, a sensible, smart, achievable framework to help you move on your green journey. And all the way along, keep everybody informed, including your team, but also very much around your clients and transparency.
And presumably share what you're doing with others so that it can be replicated and multiplied in its impact.
Telling your green story is really important.
Keith.
Yeah, I'd very much echo what Christopher was saying. I mean, the most successful businesses I've seen implement sustainable solutions are the ones that have empowered their staff, that have listened to their staff, that have said to their staff, look, this is important, but please, you're the experts. How can we make this better? And, staff they know so many small tricks. Often they don't cost very much. Little changes that can actually start making a big impact. So I definitely say, empower the staff, encourage the staff, form a sustainability team within your workplace of people who they will happily give some of their time. And they'll become more and more impassioned about your business as they do it. So it's a real win-win-win. And yes, as Andrea said, please showcase what you're doing. Make sure other businesses know about it. Get in touch with groups that are there to share best practice and spread the word.
I'm looking forward to working with the three of you and no doubt lots of other people around the world to get these practices showcased on the WTM's Platform for Change, which is our main effort between now and WTM next year. We really do need to take President Biden's challenge very seriously. This is the critical decade, and we need to make much more rapid progress. We've come to the end of our time. Can I thank Andrea Nicholas from Green Tourism, Keith Bradley from the managing partner at Globally, a great website for resources, and Chris Warren and My Green Butler, based out of Australia. Thanks for your time, and thanks for being here in the audience and around the world on Zoom watching this. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.